What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the third episode of the roundup of the series of previewing all 30 NBA teams. Today, I'm going to be talking about the Utah Jazz. So, they're sitting at the fourth seed in the West currently. So, they had a good record of 41-23. Quinn Snyder is considered a good coach. They have a great setup for a championship roster. They have a good building block and a good setup that they one day contend for a championship. But a lot of teams like the Jazz as this dark horse finals championship team because they beat Russell Westbrook 2 years ago, and they just have some killers on their team apparently. But I just don't see it. I mean, I get coming into the season there was high hopes because they traded for Mike Conley, and it seemed to be this great trade in the moment where Mike Conley was going to come in, could give you 20 and 8 on any given night, but that just wasn't the case. I don't know if he's getting older or he just needed a year to get adjusted, but he just didn't perform well at all. He was a little hurt. He was hurt for a while too, but even when he was healthy, the Jazz were playing better without him. So you could definitely point to some of the losses to Mike Conley's unavailability and his lack of presence when he was on the court. So that's the first player I'm going to get into in the point guard position. He obviously started when he was there. He averaged 14 points per game and averaged 4 assists, which is fine. I mean, it's not bad. It's not like 5-5 where you're just not supposed to be a starting point guard. He's still capable of being a starting point guard, but when you look at his actual efficiency, 40% from the field and 37% from three, that just doesn't cut it for a point guard. I mean, if you're not the main scorer on a team and you're averaging 14 on 40%, you should not be shooting the ball. I mean, Mike Conley would have one game where he'd get 30 on 60% from the field, but besides that, I would be looking at the box scores and I would see a ton of 6 for 19 nights or 5 for 14 nights, and you just can't have that. That's not good enough, and that's one of the reasons they made that trade for Jordan Clarkson, who was their sixth man. I know they had Emmanuel Mudiay, who actually played pretty decent. But if you actually want to contend for a championship, which the Jazz thought they could, and think they can once the season resumes, but I don't know how likely that is now that basically their second leading scorer is out for the year, even if he comes back, Bojan Bogdanovic. So, Jordan Clarkson had a really, really good year, especially when he was traded. I actually dropped him in fantasy when he came to the Jazz because I thought he wouldn't have many opportunities to show what he can do because there's Donovan Mitchell, Gobert, Joe Ingles, Mike Conley, Bojan Bogdanovic. But off the bench, he put up great numbers. He averaged 16 points of the year, but when he was playing for the Jazz, I mean, he was just, I would see a lot of 12 for 18s. I'd see a lot of 10 for 14s. He was just shooting incredibly efficient, and he was knocking down shots in big spots. And Jordan Clarkson's been on losing teams for the most of his career. I mean, he was on those bad Lakers teams. He was on the Jazz team with LeBron. The Cavs team with LeBron, not Jazz. But he's been on losing. He was also on the bad Cavs teams. So he's experienced a lot of losing. So I didn't think he would be able to step up in these big spots. But he has, and he's been really great. He's been a player that the Jazz probably didn't expect to play as well as he has, and they traded him for him the trade deadline, and a great acquisition. I mean, could they have gotten a true playmaker at point guard because Mike Conley isn't really doing it, and could have traded for someone who could actually distribute instead of looking to attack? Maybe. But I think this is the right move because they needed to score off the bench. If you look at their bench, I mean, Joe Ingles comes off the bench when Royce O'Neal is inserted into the starting lineup over him, and now he won't because Bojan's hurt. But earlier in the season, they didn't really have scoring off the bench. I mean, Royce O'Neal, when he didn't start, I guess, played some minutes. Jordan Yang is fine. Tony Bradley's fine. And Jordan Clarkson really provided this spark plug where he would just come in, hit 3 threes, and all of a sudden they're up 6 or they cut the lead down to 2. And it's just, he was a great player for the Jazz this year. Now moving to the shooting guard position. Donovan Mitchell, obviously their superstar. He averaged 24 and 4 and 4 on 55% from the field, and what did he shoot from 3? 36% from 3. Obviously not great shooting from distance, but that's not what he's really known for. He's known for his mid-range game, attacking to the basket. The first half of the year, he really was very slow. When the Jazz were doing poorly, they were like at a 500 record for the first 10 games. He wasn't playing well at all, but that happened with Donovan Mitchell last year too, where he started off really slow, and then as the second half of the season started, he really, really stepped it up. So he's obviously a superstar. Do I think he could be the best player on a championship team? Potentially 2 to 3 years down the line, but not right now. He could score, he could play defense, he can do it all, but does he do it all well enough to be a best player on a team that could contend for or win a championship? I don't say he's anywhere near the level of KD or LeBron or Kawhi right now. So he's still really, really young. This is only his third year, so third or fourth year. Let me think. I think it's his fourth. I think it's his fourth year, actually. I could be wrong, though. It's either his third or fourth. But he still has a lot of room to grow. He's a little bit on the shorter end for a shooting guard, but he's quick and he makes up for it, so it really doesn't matter. He got a steal per game. I mean, he wasn't crazy with the steals, but he could play defense. He's not someone like Trae Young who has a worse defensive rating in the NBA as a superstar. He could play defense, which you want. That's why I see him as the second best player on a championship team, because he needs a ball in his hands, but so a second best player needing the balls in your hands is fine. But he could play defense and he could score, but to carry the load of carrying a team to a championship, I don't think he could do that. I mean, maybe to the second round, but in the second round, you're going to have to play someone like Kawhi or LeBron. So I just don't see him matching up against that. At the backup shooting guard, I mean, they didn't really have much for the backup shooting guard. Jordan Clarkson would play some backup 2 minutes. Joe Ingles maybe. But that's really it. Moving to the small forward. Also, Bojan Bogdanovic would play some minutes there when he was healthy, but no. They announced last week that he's out for the season when the season resumes. So that's like killer. That's like the kill shot. I mean, he averaged 20 points per game this year on 44% from the field and 40% from three. He was great this year. I mean, phenomenal. No one expected him. He was on the Pacers last year. No one expected him to perform like he is. And it's just truly incredible. I've been tracking his career since he was on the Nets because I'm a Nets fan. And when he got traded for Karis LeVert, I was thinking, oh, okay, I like that trade. I don't think Bojan's going to be that good. I'll see him as like a 10-point-per-game scorer. But he's really proved me wrong. He's averaged 20 points per game this year, which is nothing I would have saw for him. I mean, he was just good scorer in the Pacers last year, but 20 points per game on a team that's contending for a championship, I mean, that's crazy. He was their player that would come in and just score. That's why I don't think Donovan Mitchell could be the best player on a championship team, because he's not just going to come in and drop 40. Bojan doesn't do that either, but you could rely on Bojan every night. He's so consistent. Sometimes Donovan Mitchell has these nights where he's brutal, because if he's not hitting his shot, and he sometimes he's just not good. But if you need your best player where even on an off night, he's just helping a team win, just his presence out there. You could argue Donovan Mitchell does that, but I compare this Jazz team to someone like the Heat. The Heat may be a little better in my opinion just because their experience having Jimmy Butler. But they're both teams that are really fun to watch. I mean, I had a lot of fun watching this Jazz team all year. But at the end of the day, you're not going to pick them to win the championship. If you're an organization fine with contending and you don't care if your team doesn't win a ring, then the Jazz are in a perfect spot. But if you really want to go all out for a ring, this roster is just not good enough. When they traded for Mike Conley, I think they expected him to be this piece where he'd give you 25 on any given night, and he would be their second scorer. But he was their fourth scorer. He was even behind Rudy Gobert in scoring, where Rudy Gobert is not known for being a scorer, and that Mike Conley was supposed to average 20 points per game. He's never been an all-star, but he's been considered an all-star caliber player his whole career. And it's a shame that he kind of just fell off a cliff this year. Maybe he just needed a year to get adjusted to a new team, as he's only played for the Grizzlies his whole career, and then after 10 years or so, he just gets traded. We'll see. So moving to the backup small forward position, Joe Ingles played some small forward backup and some point guard backup, some power forward backup. He's versatile. I mean, Joe Ingles is just a great guy, a great player. You see some of the stuff. He's just a fun to watch player. He talks trash. He knows how to shoot. He could play make. He's not the fastest guy out there. He had his career high against the Nets this year, and that was a really fun game. I mean, it wasn't for me, because we lost. The Nets lost because Joe Ingles went crazy. But Joe Ingles could do it all. A great backup, and an even okay starter. When he came in this league, I know he came into the league while he's older. He's already up there in age. He's probably like 30, I think. I just thought he was just this 3-point shooter. You see this Joe Ingles guy in 2K, he has like a 95 3-point rating. You think, oh, he's just another one of those white guys who can just only shoot. But he really isn't. He's not the best defender out there, but he's tall, so he's not just getting bodied in the paint, and he could hold his own on defense, and he really could play make. I mean, coming off the bench, Jordan Clarkson doesn't really provide the playmaking that you want from a point guard, but Joe Ingles could play make. I mean, maybe his assists don't exactly show it. He averaged 5 assists per game, which was the most on the team. But you could just tell when he's out there. He just knows what passes to make, and he kind of runs the offense when he's out there almost. Like, it's a run through his decision making. He's not taking all the shots, but it's a run through the decisions Joe Ingles makes. Moving to power forward, this position needs work. I feel like this is going to be a trending theme, as there honestly isn't that many good power forwards pure power forwards in the NBA these days. Royce O'Neal played some power forward. Joe Ingles played some power forward. Bojan played some power forward. They just extended Royce O'Neal to like a 3-year, $30 million or something. 3-year. He's not getting paid a lot of money. He's not overpaid. He's a decent player. He's a good glue guy. Great defender. He didn't really score a lot this year. He only averaged 6 points per game, but he's just a good on-ball defender. He could knock down the three. He's a good player he's like a fine worst starter, but he's a good player to come off your bench and just play good defense and hit a 3 or 2 and then just come out. You don't want him playing too many minutes out there because he's a liability offensively if he's not hitting a shot. So if his shot's off, there's really no point unless you really want to lock down someone. He could do that. He's not the best player out there, but I am a fan of his game, the way he plays. He's a 3-and-D guy. Reminds me a little of Robert Covington. Probably a little worse at this point. He's probably a little worse at this point in his career, but they very similar games. He could both knock down the three, both could play defense, and yeah. So moving to the center position, obviously you have Rudy Gobert, and Tony Bradley's played some backup minutes for him. I'm not going to get into the whole coronavirus situation because that doesn't really involve basketball. I'm not going to get into those politics about Rudy Gobert touching all those cameras and whatever. I mean, it wasn't very smart of him, but that's not basketball related, so I'm not going to get into it. So he's just one of those 7'3" guys. You're like, wow, he can move. Like, he's tall, but he can move. He's not like a Kwame Brown or even like a Shaquille O'Neal like later in his career. Obviously, Shaq on the Magic was going everywhere, and he was up and down the court. But Rudy Gobert can move for his size, and he's so long. And his numbers were a little down defensively this year. He averaged 2 blocks, but he just didn't seem the same protecting the rim as he did in previous years. He's probably not going to win Depoy this year. I would see it going to someone like Kawhi maybe this year, or even Giannis if he doesn't get MVP. Or even Ben Simmons, he might win Defensive Player of the Year. But Gobert still had a good year. He averaged 15 and 13 or 15 and 14, and he's just a solid center. I mean, like above average center. He's a good center to have, but in today's game, if you're gonna have a center who can't shoot, you can't build their team around him, and they haven't. They have Donovan Mitchell, but the whole theme of this video to me is Mike Conley. He's the reason the Jazz aren't going to be contending for championship, because last year what I was thinking looking at this roster is they need a true point guard. They had Joe Ingles and Donovan Mitchell running the one, but they needed a true good point guard, and I thought when they traded for Mike Conley, he was going to be that. I mean, in Memphis, he had some great years. Him and Marc Gasol were a great duo. They didn't win a ring, but they were good. And he kind of just fell off a cliff this year, and that happens when you get older. But if he has a bounce back year, this Jazz team could make a little run. Something that glares out to me is they're only 111 points per game, which was 17th in the NBA, which is not good for this much talent. You could blame that on Mike Conley. You could blame that on Quinn Snyder for his system, but I don't think it's Quinn Snyder's. I think it's more on when people like Mike Conley aren't hitting their shots, and you have Rudy Gobert out there who is not shooting the ball, and someone like Royce O'Neal who's not scoring a lot. You have to rely on Donovan Mitchell a lot to score, and if he's not scoring effectively or insanely well, then your points per game is not going to be insanely high. I mean, you could rely on Bojan Bogdanovic to give you 20 a game, but if Donovan's not giving you 30, then your team's not going to score over 117 points. I mean, 111 points isn't. I mean, if you said 20 years ago 111 points per game, you'd say, "Oh, that's a really good offensive team." But now the NBA is so up and down, and the pace is so different that there's a lot more scoring and a lot less defense. And they have defense. Donovan Mitchell, Royce O'Neal, Rudy Gobert, Mike Conley's not a bad defender, but they just need someone. If they can get Mike Conley back to what he was, they'd be in good shape. Or if they can sign someone like Fred VanVleet, honestly, Fred VanVleet would be a perfect fit for this team. He looks to score, but he's a playmaker, and he's consistent. You know what you're going to get from Freddie. He's going to give you like 18 and 5. He could knock down the 3. He's a good free throw shooter. He's a good defender for his size. He's not a great defender, but for his size, he's a good defender. So overall, this Jazz team just needs another piece. If they could somehow get Mike Conley to get back to his prime form, he would be that piece. But if not, watch out for them to sign someone like Fred VanVleet, or maybe Serge Ibaka to get a power forward, or maybe trade for someone, or get Paul Millsap, So overall, this Jazz roster is a very good roster. They're obviously the 4th seed in the West and contending for a championship, but they're just not there yet. I will not choose them. Maybe they'll get out of the first round, but that's as far as they'll get. They're not making it past the Lakers or the Clippers or any of those teams like that. So overall, Jazz have a great team for the future. They're just missing that one piece. It may be a superstar, or it could just be someone like Fred VanVleet who would just come out there and score. And they just need one more scorer, and then I would consider them a championship contender. Thank you all for watching. That's going to be it for today's video. Drop a like, subscribe. New video every day. Video on the Boston Celtics coming out tomorrow. A lot of good things to say about the Boston Celtics. I really like their roster. Coming from New Jersey, I'm not the biggest Boston fan, but I respect what's going on with the Celtics organization. They have a lot of good pieces there, a lot of good coaching, a lot of good management there. So I'm going to be talking about them tomorrow, and that video would be released later tomorrow, I think. Thank you all. Peace.